Hello, good evening, everyone. Good evening, Samir, Muhammad Samir, Amin, Samer, and Khalid. Great to see you guys, and I hope more participants come as well. Thank you very much, for joining the first webinar from Strategy Platforms, and I hope you're going to enjoy the session today. I'll go ahead and start with the agenda for today's webinar, and it's a combination of different topics related to strategy, all around a specific case study that I hope you will find interesting as well. So what we'll start with is some definitions and what is strategy platforms to start with. And then we're going to look into the concept of strategy, the concept of foresight, and the concept of business model, and try to set up some definitions to start with, so that we're all prepared to go into the case study itself. Now, the case study I'm going to present is for a company called John Deere, and it's a very big company in the U.S. Maybe not everybody in our region is familiar with this company, but it's one of the biggest companies in the U.S. It's number 84 in the Fortune 100 list. And we're going to go into the case study itself, and as you see from the agenda, the company was looking for new revenue streams. How did it look into the future, and what did they do? We simply want to see what actually happened when they wanted to invent a new business model, get new revenue streams. How was their old strategy versus the new strategy, and so on, until we get to the point where we present real examples of how did they actually build their new business models. And then finally, we'll have a recap. Now, I'm not expecting throughout the presentation that I just keep on talking on my side. At any point in time, you need to discuss, you need to ask a question, please feel free. I mean, I'm expecting this to be very interactive, inshallah. So shall we go ahead? I need to see a thumbs up or yes. Okay. So Amin is advising me to move ahead. Okay, now I know that the presenters, they're familiar with me, but I presented a profile so that, yeah, the ones who are not very familiar, my name is Muhammad Marwan. My work experience has been through four main milestones. One is starting in the IT field and the business consulting with the European company called Scala Business Solutions. Then I moved to different leadership positions with General Electric for around 12 years across the Middle East, Africa, and Turkey. Then I joined an interesting company called El Mentor. It was a small startup at that time. And then when I left 4 years earlier, it was quite an emerging company and very well known in the region. And then my last milestone is with a company called Kadoon. It's a combination of business units in Saudi Arabia and Dubai, combination of healthcare, trading, construction, project management, and wellness as well. And throughout this journey, I built some skills, as you see from the list below the map. And part of that is about strategy, it's about execution and operations. And that is part of my passion to present this webinar, because there has been lots of actual stories that I've gone through over the last 20 years. So I hope you enjoy it in the same way that I joined it as well. The other way in which I explain myself or to understand my profile is the education. So I finished my education at the American University in Cairo as an industrial engineer. Then I went to earn different certifications whenever I needed more structured knowledge and wisdom at work. So part of that was the PMP certificate, the CSCP from the APEX. And then I got 2 master's degree, and finally my doctorate degree from Capella University, which is around strategy and innovation. I like reading, so I started writing as well. And I had my first book published around 2.5 years back. So this is about the person. Now, let's see, could just hold on for a second. I think there's someone to admit. Okay, so the other part is what is actually strategy platforms. Now, strategy platforms is still in the incubation phase. It's not a consulting company yet. It's still an idea that I will explain. So strategy, even when I teach at the university, I ask students about what strategy is, and I don't get very clear answers. So to set the stage, strategy has different definitions, as you can see on the screen. I will present the definition that I came up with, perhaps after 20 years of wisdom. And strategy is the choice of response to the future challenges. Okay, this is how I see it. Companies or even people, they look at the future, they see a challenge, they see an opportunity, and their decision or their choice of the response is their strategy in very simple terms. So that's one part of strategy platform, the strategy part. Then we move to what a platform is. And, being someone who's always worked on the field of IT and digital, I was always excited by the platform concept. And, a platform can be different things. It can be a platform that's extracting oil from the sea. It can be a wooden platform that a carpenter can do it himself. But anyway, it's a raised level where you can add things and do things differently. It can be a platform of people, can be a platform of processes, or can be a platform like applications and software, as in today's world. So, through the concept of platforms, our community, the strategy platforms community, is working on advancing concepts related to strategy, which is formulation, alignment, and execution as well. Okay. What I'm going to be focusing on, whenever I work on the strategy platform side, are those 6 boxes that you can see. There's the strategic foresight, how to see the future, strategy formulation, how to come up actually with the strategy or write the strategy itself. How does all of this fit into the business architecture of the company? Okay. And then how are you going to execute the strategy instead of just being a theoretical wishful thinking? How is all of this tied to innovation and business modeling? And of course, the most important asset that we have, which is the human capital or the human part of strategy. Currently, we're still setting up some channels for strategy platforms. There's a LinkedIn newsletter, there's a YouTube channel, and hopefully more to come on the way, inshallah, until we have, something solid that represents strategy platform. I'll stop here for a minute or so. If you have any questions or you have any inquiries, please go ahead. Okay, it's clear, Crystal. We move forward. Thumbs up. Samer is asking me to move forward, so I'll move forward. Okay, let's start with some concepts before we get into the case study of today. And we're going to understand what is the problem with strategy. And then we'll understand as well, what does foresight mean and what is the relationship between both of them. And we'll talk about the business model. And then we're going to take those 3 concepts and apply them right away to the case study. So what are the burning issues in today's world or strategy? Now, in many cases, the strategy is, many companies think that it's just natural to have a strategy, although they don't have. They think it's natural that their employees understand strategy, although they never communicated it to the employees. They just have many assumptions that actually make the strategy process extremely faulty and full of problems and issues. Now, what companies usually do is that, or the trap they fall into, they don't have a framework to formulate a strategy. So if I ask a company or any one of you guys on how do you actually come up with the strategy, I'm not talking about the process of executing the strategy. No, maybe just coming up with one slide for any of your companies saying, this is what we're going to do over the coming 18 months. This is our choice because this is the challenge of the geopolitical issues in the region, or this is the opportunity of the blockchain and supply chain, or this is the opportunity of crypto, or all of those opportunities and challenges. How do you get to this strategy in itself? In many cases, there is no framework to come up with the strategy. Another very important issue is skipping what we call the business capability mapping. Companies usually come up with a strategy, whether it's right or wrong, and then they move right away into the strategic planning without even assessing, do we have this capability in the company or not? Okay, and you might think it's not very intelligent to do this, but believe it or not, there are many companies who do not have someone who looks into the capability of the company and then say, you know what, we don't have the capability to manufacture X item, or we don't have the capability to establish market research, or there is no capability for development of our blue collar, for example. And that is why they get surprised later when they start the execution, and then they find, oops, 1, 2, 3, 4, we don't have those kind of capabilities. And by the way, capability mapping is like a science of its own within the business architecture. Another few issues is that some of those strategic initiatives that companies come up with at the beginning of the year, they die over time. So maybe they're announced in February, and by April and May, they already start dying because of the disconnect in the company. Maybe it was an idea from the CEO that everybody thought it was a genius idea, and then the CEO forgot about it in March, and everybody forgot about it in April. So there was no actually champion for strategy, even including the CEO, and it just went down the drain. One other very important thing is what we call the myopic focus. When you're short-sighted, like myself, you have a myopic focus on goals and metrics and KPIs and dashboards and all of those things. And people think that, when they're very busy doing that stuff, this is execution of strategy, not necessarily. Okay. So, and the list can, go on for a long time. If we go to, one of the cases, one of the famous articles from Harvard Business Review, they kind of repeat the same thing. Why do strategies fail? And you can see the link down there. Either the companies, they do not understand what the problem is, okay? They do not understand the capabilities, like just what I said. There are so many pressures of the employees, and they don't know whether they do A or B or C, or where actually is the focus on the strategy, or it's a cultural issue. And the famous quote, culture eats strategy for breakfast. So we start in the morning by saying our strategy is going to be 1, 2, 3. By the end of the day, culture eats this 1, 2, 3 and replaces it with something else. So strategy is, I wouldn't say a crisis, but it is a problematic field in today's world, especially with all of those changes going on. So let's take 2 examples that I find very interesting about examples where strategies actually failed, and they failed big time. Okay, and they're interesting cases. So I chose Hertz, which was a case that just happened maybe 4 months ago, and the case with GE Digital. Let me tell you the story about both. So in 2021, just maybe 2.5 years ago, Hertz, the famous rental company, said that our strategy is going to be with electric vehicles. We're gonna buy thousands of Tesla cars, replace all our standard combustion engine cars with Tesla, and this is the future that we're gonna go. So this is their choice. This is the opportunity that they saw in the future. They're gonna do this major change very quickly, and we're gonna go electric. Okay, so fast forward into the future, just last January. So Hertz announced that they're going to be selling all of 1/3 of their fleet, okay, 20,000 cars after they bought them from Tesla. They reversed the entire strategy. They're going to get rid of a major part of the fleet by end of 2024. In addition to all of that, the depreciation for the EVs, and especially for Tesla, was huge. So just within 2 years, the company has had a great loss, financially. And in March, they fired the CEO. Okay, so it looks like it was one of those ideas that, yeah, let's do it. We're going to go electric and all of those dreams. Now, whether the execution was a failure or not, it's not necessarily that they failed the execution, but the strategy in itself was a failure from day one. Maybe they didn't see the future in the right way. Now, the other side was GE Digital, and maybe Khalid and maybe Omar as well, they know that from GE. Now, GE Digital was a big bang type of thing announced in, as you see on the screen, 2014 or 2015, that GE is going to transform into being a software industrial company. Instead of being an industrial company with the standard, doing or manufacturing the healthcare equipment or aviation engines or power turbines. And, it was a super big shift in strategy. And it was actually huge because compared to the size of similar software companies of the world at that time, the IBMs and the other companies, this was a big question mark. Okay. But there were billions and billions spent between 2014. Again, fast forward in 2017, as you see here. By the way, all of this screen, those are actual captures from websites, from news, from CNBC and other platforms. So in 2017, they said that the Predix platform for GE Digital failed for now, and by 2021, with all the spin-offs of GE, more or less, the GE Digital does not exist anymore. Now, this is something that has cost billions of dollars to the company. Again, now, from my point of view, that's my personal view, the case for GE Digital was a failure on both sides, on choosing the strategy in the first place, and failure in execution for many reasons. Not well communication, politics inside the company, not focusing on the customer demands, trying to completely altered the DNA of the company, which is, as we will see from the case today, this will not be the case with John Deere. When you're attempting to do those like major overhauls or revamp with companies of that size, probably they don't work that easily. So, this was one example or two examples of a failure of strategy execution. Now, and on a funny note, when I was preparing the presentation, I always remember this quote for Stephen Covey, when he said that when like employees in companies, when we are in a jungle, we're so busy cutting through the undergrowth, what is under the terrain of the jungle. Okay, but people are not even realizing that this is the wrong jungle in the first place. Okay, and this is an example when you focus on a strategy like Hertz. This strategy is the wrong direction, but everybody's saying we're busy doing this, and they continue digging and digging and digging until they find that they're in the wrong jungle. So always ask yourself, am I in the right jungle or not, before it's too late. So this was about the strategy part. Now, what is strategic foresight? And this is one of the areas that is very interesting for me since I started working on it maybe like 7 or 8 years ago. And foresight, as the word explains, it's about seeing the future, sight of what is ahead. So actually, it's a systematic process of, you have multi-steps. How do you know from now, or not know, how do you expect from now what different futures you might have? Okay, there might be a future where the crypto annihilates all the banknotes and cash. There might be a future where there might be more pandemics. What are all of those alternative futures that are ahead of us? Of course, this is not like looking through a crystal ball and just praying for something to happen. No, there is a systematic process for this. And that is why there are different tools that you can see here. Let me stop here because I think Khalid has a comment. Khalid, can you please ask your question? You can go ahead and ask right away. Okay. Khalid?
Assalamu alaikum.
Salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Thanks, Muhammad, for inviting us for this. Muhammad, you mentioned the two examples of the failed strategy. My question was, the failure was in the execution or the idea itself, especially regarding GE Digital.
Okay. I'll go back to see this error number one that Harvard Business Review is talking about is not understanding the problem or the opportunity. So you might say that, let's take this as an example. Somebody comes to the CEO or the top management and said that the competitor ABC is building a rocket to space. Okay. And then we rush right away saying that, okay, we need to have a strategy that is counter strategy to this and so on. This is an example of that you don't understand the problem or the opportunity. Okay, maybe the competitor knows something that you don't do. Maybe the competitor is actually wrong. Maybe the whole market is going in the wrong direction. And actually, instead of building something extra, you need to stop the business or even shut it down. So one part is, as you said, the choice in itself from the beginning was wrong. Okay, and I believe this was the case very clear with Hertz. Okay, they should have never gone with the Tesla electric vehicles. And by the way, the Hertz as a company is relatively simple. It's a car rental company. Of course, it's huge, but they buy cars and they rent it to people or to other companies. So the choice from the beginning was wrong. So this is an example of a not very intelligent idea, I would say. The case about GE Digital, it's very complicated, and I believe it's a combination of both. When I say GE or I say we, because I was an ex-employee in the company, we should have never gone that far, that deep. And today's case study will explain why there is an alternative scenario to what GE did. Okay. In addition to that, the execution itself of GE Digital with the different departments inside GE, with the big companies, with the Predix, with the software office that was in San Francisco, all of this is an example of actually error number two, which is not understanding the organization capabilities. Okay. So I hope I answered the question. Good. So for the Foresight now, how do you do this? There are many tools for Foresight, and maybe we'll have another webinar next month just dedicated to Foresight. But to see the future, you need to scan the environment, see what is going on. Are there signals coming from Europe, from the Gulf, from the US? Is there something going on with the technology? Has there been repeated technology patents about something that was never happening before? All of this type of sensing, okay, or borrowing ideas from the future is part of the tools. And of course, one of the biggest tools in Foresight is scenario planning, where you have different scenarios in front of you, like the military long time back. And based on this scenario, you start setting up your strategy. One of the biggest issues that strategy has in today's world is that there is no foresight process. Because for strategy to be developed or formulated, you need inputs, different inputs from the market, competitors, the government, the customers, all of this. But part of that is how do you imagine the future and in 2 years or 3 years time, and then bring it forward to formulate your current strategy. And that's why Foresight is a major source of monetization of growth, because you discover opportunities, so you tend to increase your revenue, or it can be a way as well to avoid risks. You see that something is going to happen in 2 years' time. We need to change this model or change the business or even spin it off completely or revamp our factories and replace it with something else. It's kind of a mix between an opportunity flagging system and an early warning system as well. So this is part of why foresight and seeing the future, anticipating the future is extremely important. Now, foresight happens on different levels. It can happen on a personal level, and I've discussed part of that in my book as well. And it can happen, of course, on medium-sized company level, big companies like the GE and Ford and IBM and Nike, as you see, or it can happen on a global level and a country level. So the UN has its own program for foresight. The UK has a program. There are tens of think tanks in the US who have their own foresight program. and they have one common objective: how to anticipate the future. Now, foresight is not forecasting. It's not about what's going to be the temperature after 1.5 years, or what will be the revenue of that company, or the 1 ounce of gold is going to be $3,200. No, it's about creating an image of the future and see how will our company fit into that future, not only one future, but actually a set of alternative futures. So any questions regarding the foresight part? Okay, so we discussed strategy, we discussed foresight, and now we go into business model, which is the third concept before we get into the case. Now, this is an example of how does foresight work, and let me use the annotation here. Okay, so yeah, so this is the past. This is what has happened. And now we start into our current assessment. Okay, what is actually going on? So you start scanning what is going on now. What are the trends? What are customers talking about? What is happening in the supermarket? What is happening on the internet? What is happening with the climate? What are the governments thinking of? Differentiation in the taxation system, and so on. I mean, scanning is a science of its own. You also try to understand, okay, all of those signals that you had, what is the driver? Why are customers behaving this way? Why is nobody wearing X anymore? Why are everybody shifting to either blue or yellow or white t-shirts? Now, this can be an indication of a trend that will come later, but it's very important to understand what is driving those trends. Is the global warming part of an Earth cycle, or is it simply because of the carbon emissions and so on? And based on that, you start creating different future. So you have alternative future A, B, and C. Okay. In this future, the corporate world is gonna, be controlling the world, and all the startups will collapse, for example. Alternative B is that governments will take over. Future number C is something totally different and chaotic. Okay, you propose different scenarios. And based on that, you start formulating your strategy by saying, okay, my options are whatever. I close the business, or I start manufacturing 1, 2, 3, or I close my businesses in Asia and focus on Latin America and so on. Those are the different strategic options that you have. And maybe after 1 or 2 years, you start the cycle again, and so on. Now, foresight is not, the horizon for the foresight is not short, okay? We're talking minimum about 2, 3 years at minimum, and of course with companies and government policies, we're talking about 10 years. But it's a major factor of differentiation, especially in a world where everything's changing too much. Because there are two approaches. One approach says, okay, the world is changing a lot. We don't need to think about the future. It's useless. And there is another alternative where you say, no, companies should be empowered, and they should really have scenarios in their pocket, whatever happens in the future. Okay, good. We move forward.
نسأل
Sure, Omar, go ahead.
نحكي بالعربي ولا نحكي بالإنجليزي؟
I prefer in English because of the recording.
طيب, okay. So my question is with regards to the timeline. I mean, you in the nick of time, you answered the question about foresight being for determining or evaluating the future, which is going to be 2, 3 years out or whatever. My question is, how do you determine what incident is going to happen at what time point? And how confident, what is the confidence level that is there some type of method or approach where you can allocate a confidence level for the foresight that's being done at a point in time. How do you qualify it? How do you qualify it?
Okay, a great question. Let me answer it in two ways. The second way, I'll explain it later in the case study. The first part is, look, Foresight does not usually produce quantitative outcomes. Okay, quantitative outcomes, they come out of processes like forecasting. Okay, so forecasting might say that in the third quarter of 2025, gold is going to drop that far because of 1, 2, 3, or because of the hurricanes that happen every August in the US, there's going to be a certain issue at that time. Or you might say that because the patent of a pharmaceutical company will expire in January 2026, there's going to be a big drop in revenue in Q2 of 2026. Okay, this is not actually real foresight. This is forecasting based on quantitative methods and so on. Okay, so the more you are focusing on confidence, okay, you tend to go into forecasting and quantitative techniques. The more you want to stretch into the future and really try to imagine the future of your company, okay, so if I'm establishing, let's say, strategy platforms as a consulting company now, if I want to imagine how will this company look like 3 years from now, I'll be using foresight techniques and some market research and some other stuff. But it's foresight will not tell me that you might get a revenue of 500,000 dirhams if you start working on this from now. This is not the objective of the foresight. And we'll come to John Deere's case, and I'll explain how did they actually use foresight in changing their business. Okay?
Well, I guess you can take the man out of sales, but you cannot take the sales out of the salesman.
Nice point.
So many years of doing forecasting has brainwashed me. So
yeah, and by the way, the let's say the foresighters, they don't like the forecasters that much. Okay, third concept, business model. Now, why I'll be talking about the business model, because it is the way that cascades the strategy down. Okay, so if I say that our strategy is we're gonna go north, okay, this is our choice because the south is becoming very hot. Okay, now the business model through this, the famous trio, what are we gonna offer to the customer and how we're gonna do it and why? This explained the logic of the company. Okay, so strategies at a certain high level, but when I want to actually tell a logical story about how am I going to do this, I use tools, or we use tools such as the business model tools. And you know, there are the business model canvas and so many details about that. I will not get into the mechanics of it. We'll see another representation later. But why did I choose to plug in the business model here? Because part of the big changes that happen to companies are through business model innovation. Okay, so if I currently have a business model, okay, and I say that, you know what, instead of selling, let's say I'm a car distributor, and instead of selling only German cars, I'll also get the distribution rights for Chinese cars. That's not a change in business model, and that's not a change in business model innovation, meaning that I'm actually revamping my business model. Usually the literature in business and many case studies saying that you can reach an innovation if you change 2 of the 3 circles. At the center, there is the who. This is actually the customer, okay? What are you going to offer this customer? This is your value proposition. How are you going to do it? Those are the processes, manufacturing, trading, whatever you're doing. And why? How are you going to capture this revenue? As you see here from those four triangles down there, if you change 2 of the 3, and change, I'm talking about dramatic change, probably you're heading towards a business model innovation. The business model is changing dramatically. So any of the change in 2 usually results in innovation. And of course, if you change the 3, that's a totally different model as well. Now, this idea is important because as we'll go into the case, we really understand some changes that they did on the business model and how, to what extent they were innovative. And I believe, back to Khalid's question, this was one of the, I wouldn't say mistakes, but let's say underestimation of the change that GE Digital has done, because they chose to go to triangle number 3. And triangle number 3 is a major change. When you multiply it by size of the investment in GE Digital and the size of overall of such a great company like GE, it's a very, very, very risky decision, you know? So is this idea clear about how do you innovate the business model, where you change the what and the why, or any combination of the 3? Clear? Good. Okay.
Muhammad, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Yes, it's clear, but I want to take you also to the example of GE and the triangle number 4, the one you highlighted here. So the way now GE is managing the digital. Okay, now we have GE, of course, before the spin-off, GE Healthcare Digital, or digital healthcare, digital aviation, digital blah, blah, blah. And I can see that is, at least in digital healthcare, they did a lot of things. Yeah, I mean, they already opened a new opportunity.
You're right.
And yes, so this means that somehow they managed to correct the underestimation you mentioned before in somehow. I don't know what the GE digital in aviation doing.
Yeah, I'll explain that, and your point is great. But remember one thing, healthcare digital, or digital healthcare, or digital for aviation, or whatever, it's a totally different concept than GE Digital. Okay?
I see.
And actually, the case study we're going to explain, I'll start it right away, is supporting what you said. So you have a healthcare business model, and you want to add on top of this, you want to add on top of this model as well some other new value propositions, or new customer segments, or new processes. Okay, so you have a core, and you're building on top of that new business model, which is the healthcare digital, or aviation, or energy digital. Okay, but to have something completely as separate as the GE Digital, this is where I think it was the biggest mistake from the start. Clear?
Clear.
Good. Okay, so as I said, at any point in time, you can ask me. We're good on time. So after going through this, kind of introduction about the concepts between strategy, foresight, and business models, we're going to go into the case study. And the case study I have here is for John Deere. And John Deere, I've done lots of research on that during my doctorate program, for 2 reasons. One is I always have a soft spot for companies that are working on kind of equipment and big assets, and they complement that, or they enter the digital world in the right way. One example of this is John Deere. GE is another example. One of the very first companies where I did my consulting was called Atlas Copco, the ones who are manufacturing heavy equipment, and they're very similar to John Deere. That was a case, that was 2003. And I learned a lot from that company. So I have a passion towards, those kinds of companies. The other part is I wanted to get into a company where a company is changing. It's taking its time to change, not just overnight. If the CEO says something, people rush into that. And also in many cases, again, we are myopic, or we're short-sighted. We find an announcement for a company, and then we think it's the greatest example, and then Harvard Business Review does all of those miracles and success stories about it. But then a few years down the line, we found that it had failed or changed to something else, and so on. But John Deere took its time over the last 10 years to grow steadily and update parts of his business model, and even innovate in some of those other business models. So that's why I chose John Deere. Now, what does John Deere do? As you see here, they have 3 main domains or business units. One is for farming and forestry. So, all of those fields and crops in the farms, they have all of those equipment for that. In terms of harvesting, tractors, smaller equipment, utility tractors in the farm, and so on. So this is number one. Number two is the small group at the top here, which is for smaller equipment like lawns and gardens and football fields and so on. Number three is equipment for construction. Huge multi-million dollars equipment like loaders and excavators and rock drilling and so on. So they're a typical heavy equipment type of company. They've been in the US for a very long time. Almost half of their revenue comes from the US, half of the revenue comes from outside. They're actually number 84 in Fortune 500, which means they're a really big company. So this is what John Deere does. And of course, with all of those equipment, there is the standard value proposition of maintenance contracts and service contracts, spare parts, like all the other similar companies. Okay, so this is John Deere. This is what they do. Let's understand a bit about the numbers profile of John Deere. Okay, how big they are. So in simple terms, this is the 2023 data, so it's very fresh. Net sales last year was 61 billion worldwide. If you see here the revenue profile, so 44 billion 21, 52 22, and 61 23. And more or less the same thing goes for their net income. Okay. Now, why is this important? There's also some metrics about the returns on sales and return on asset, but you can refer to that later. Why is this important? Because usually when companies have this kind of steady, sustained growth, okay, without much of variability, probably they're doing many things right. Okay, that's a lesson that I've learned. Okay, being consistent in growth is an indicator that the direction chosen is correct and the company is following through. Okay, they're not distracted by some major ideas here and there. So now some companies have the ability to come up with a very big idea and then shut it down, like when Apple shut down the Apple Car idea, I think 1 year ago. Some companies do not have this. They might be distracted with many ideas, and then they find it's a very bad idea, so they go down. So probably, I'm saying probably because I'm not an employee in the company. I don't know all the secrets, but probably they're having a very clear strategy, and this will appear later. The other indicator about that they are doing well is this is another example of their revenue as well and their earning per share. So it's continuous and consistent. Now, the stock performance is another very important indicator. Let me clear the drawings. Now, why is the stock performance an indicator? It's not only that the stock is going up, and as you see from the yellow line over here, the stock went from $100 in 2018 all the way to 300 something in 23. And when I checked their numbers 5 days back, they are $400. Okay, so again, it's steady growth over the years. Now, is this a good indication? Probably, but you always need to compare it versus something. Okay, and what is very clear here is this white line, which is the S&P standard performance for the stocks. Okay, so the S&P average starting from the same point at 100 is now at something like 150. For the industrials like John Deere, it's at 200 something. So their performance has exceeded the same market for 5 continuous years. And this is another indication that, again, the company is doing something the right way. When you benchmark versus the others, they are doing well. So going back to the idea about the business model that we explained. So what is the business model for John Deere? And I'll go through some points of these. So what they offer to the customers, okay, technology capabilities, the equipment, spare parts, and after sales, and even financing services. So they lease the tractors and the excavators. Very typical heavy equipment company. They sell they manufacture the tractors and the equipment, and they sell it to the customers. They do maintenance contracts, and they also have leasing capabilities. What is their profit formula? Okay, so they sell all of this, they rent it as well, and based on the cost of raw material, servicing, the employees, distribution, marketing, they get their profit. Okay, again, very basic mathematics. What are the resources that they use? They have manufacturing facilities, services, employees, and intellectual properties. And finally, what is the process actually that they do? They design, they engineer, they manufacture, and they distribute. So this business model is actually a model that might not be very different from a business model in the 40s or the 50s, okay? You manufacture something, you sell it, you maintain it, you get revenue from what you sell, you own the design, you own the R&D and engineering, and you're responsible for your own marketing and so on. Okay, so a very typical standard business model. And looks like this was going okay. But good companies, they're not very happy with just being okay. They look into the future and they tend to see something different. And this is where we, in our story, we go back to Foresight. Before I proceed further, any questions about John Deere before we proceed? Muhammad, Khalid, Tamer? We're good? Okay. So, yeah, so John Deere, through their Foresight capabilities, and this is part of the research that I've done. Okay. They have seen 3 future trends, and this is part of the scanning and looking for trends that we talked about Foresight. What did they see coming? And they wanted to be in a future where they are part of this. Now, they might have seen something else, but this is what I've summarized from the research. Number one is omni-channel interaction with customers. Okay. Now, customers from very simple tools, like mobile phones, WhatsApp, all the other platforms that we have. It looks like there was a trend. And by the way, this started somewhere around perhaps, I would say 2015 or even a bit before that. They were seeing that looks like there's going to be a future where customers are surrounded by their suppliers, omni-channel, like what we have now, WhatsApp, social media, notifications on the desktop, pushing ads, all of those kinds of omni-channel contact centers and so on. So they saw that this is something is going to happen soon. The second trend is the commoditization of the Internet of Things. And this is an extremely intelligent outcome from Foresight. So they knew that Internet of Things is going to come, all of those hardware and software and embedded systems talking to each other. And they found that there's an opportunity because actually, believe it or not, what they're producing is physical products. Okay. And they are physical mobile products. And we'll see later, part of the ideas they came up with, what has the Internet of Things to do with their equipment. But what is even more important is this commoditization, because commoditization implies at least 2 things. Things are going to be easy and things are going to be cheap. Okay, so we're not getting into a kind of technology that is very expensive, very hard to implement. No, looks like it's going to be all over the place. So if it's going to be that abundant around us, let's seize this opportunity from the future. And something much bigger than all of this, which is the climate change. Okay, looks like, yes, the climate is going to change. And perhaps all of those who are pushing that, yes, climate is going to change, and this is not like a fad or something. I think the last hurricanes that happened to Florida last month is an indication that looks like really something is going to happen. And it's not just climate change, there are storms and so on, but actually it is the impact on the crops and the farming and the harvesting of all of those green fields in the US. So part of the ideas that they had at the beginning is they said, okay, let's start to innovate something, which is this very important part. Okay, we're going to have our tractors, okay, the tractors that they have in the field, الجرارات. They acquire agronomic data. What is agronomic data? It's actually the data captured from agriculture fields. Now, what is this kind of data? It's data related to humidity, related to the weather, related to the yield and the productivity of the crops and the harvest. Lots of data just by being in the field, you can capture it right away. But then again, how do you monetize this kind of thing? They said, okay, through this commoditization of Internet of Things, plus user experience, plus the developers, plus platforms, we're going to upload it into the cloud. Okay. And then what are we going to do about it? So that software developers and digital platforms can make use of this and actually monetize it by selling it to the farmers. Okay. Now, this might not be very it's not the first idea that comes to mind when you talk about the business of tractors and harvesting machines in a cornfield in the US. Okay, but actually, this what differentiates companies who can see the future from companies who are just focused on what they do. Okay, so this was the start of their foresight, seeing those three trends and saying, okay, we're gonna change, not change completely. Not like a case of GE Digital or Hertz. No, but we're going to innovate our business model around our existing business model. So what happened moving later is this is their strategic intent in 2020. They started before that, but this is part of what actually they intended to do. So this is like part of their strategy. Okay, so there are 2 points here that are very important. One is Deere plans to focus its action on production system and technology stack and so on. So part of their focus is going to move towards technology. They're going to build capabilities on the technology side. They didn't have developers before that, or they were not part of being a digital company. But they said, okay, part of the resources that we're allocate is going to go into building the digital capabilities. But what I found very interesting is this statement. This statement, which says that farming is a data-driven business. If you would ask somebody about what is the business of John Deere, they would say, okay, we build tractors, we give it to farmers, and then they do whatever they're going to do with it in the field. Or construction companies, they do excavations and drilling and so on, and that's it. We stop here. But actually, this statement is seeing the value proposition from the point of view of the customer. Okay, farming is not just an equipment and some blades cutting the crops and putting it in bags and so on. No, it's a data-driven business. And this is where you start rethinking about your value proposition. Now, why am I stressing this? Because actually a big part of, or statistically, many of the business model innovation ideas, they came by rethinking the value proposition. I'm not just a farming company, or I'm not only an equipment company. I can do much more. They did not drop the idea that they're a quote unquote heavy equipment company, but they said that we can do much more with our customers just beyond selling them the tractor. Now, some companies do this as a hype. They say that we're going digital and so on. And I had some doubts. So I'm going to present to you now what actually they did and how serious they were on that. So fast forward into last year, they came up with the new strategy they had, which is called Leap Ambitions, which is building on the previous strategy, and which focused on seeing their business in three main areas. One is the precision agriculture. This is the standard agriculture. Small agriculture, like sports fields and turfs and residential homes and so on. And of course, the construction and forestry. Okay. Now, what has this to do with the additional business models that we're talking about? Their strategic intent was to connect 1.5 million machines by 2026. So all of those tractors and excavators and all the other harvesting equipment from the field, and many companies do this also on the healthcare side. They said, we're going to connect 1.5 millions by 2026. The other part is deliver and scale solution as a service by 2030. And I believe this is very logical, because it's giving them, this was last year, it's giving them 7 years to actually scale this business model. And perhaps, as we'll see later, they're going to get 10% of the revenue of the company after 7 years from the digital solutions and the digital platform. So, it's kind of innovation that is, modest, realistic, gives time for right execution, gives time for the employees to really digest the change that is going on. Okay, so and what they did as well is that they had strategy champions, and this is part of the pitfalls that we were talking about at the beginning of the session. Somebody comes up with a strategy, and then companies just assume, since we communicated the strategy, is going to be executed by itself. No, they knew this case, and they had specific strategy champions for the different initiatives of what they called Leap Ambitions. Okay, and this is also a great example of very clear communication. So if somebody asks, what are our priorities? What is our strategy moving forward? You send them this slide, and then you talk about it. You don't present hundreds of PowerPoints. No, it's just, this is what we're going to do by 2026. This is what we're going to do by 2030. This is the area of focus. Okay, that's simple. So this is an example now of what they've done. They announced this in 2022, and part of the new Leap, of course, New Leap Ambition had other strategic priorities like sustainability and reduce the emissions and so on. But I'm just focusing about the transformation of their business model to the digital side. So they focus on solutions as a service. They start selling it. And what is very important, and I'll kind of conclude with this, is building the capabilities. So if you see here now, going back to the what of the business model, this is their new value proposition on top of the standard equipment of tractors and harvesting tools and excavators. You tend to look into a website with a company that really takes digital seriously for its customers. So now they have their own apps on iOS and Android. They have a university for digital solutions. They even have a rewards points because the farmers are using their app more, so they're getting more rewards. And those things, by the way, they exist. It's not a hype. It's not, with all due respect, some kind of marketing blah blah blah. No, and I'll show you examples from what they have done. So they said, moving forward, we're going to focus on solutions as part of our service business, sharing the data of the field from the farmers, sharing data from equipment. Okay, so for example, on the maintenance side, when is direct preventive maintenance, what goes down, how do you predict the spare parts, and loads of other offerings that they had for solutions as a service. Now, this is the new value proposition, the what. Let's understand how they did the how. Okay, because again, strategy. Yeah, somebody has a question.
Muhammad, do you mind the one question before you moving to the next one? You mentioned that one of their product is connecting 1.5 million machine or customer.
1.5 million machines, yes.
Okay. So how this connection will be a product to sell, and to the extent that change the value proposition itself. It's kind of
Good,
service.
good question, Khaled. I'll explain it after this slide right away. Okay. And by the way, back to Khaled's point about their target was 1.5 million machine connected. So far, they have connected 650,000 machines. So they're like maybe 40%, and they still have 1.5 years more to go. And this is something that I checked as well. It's just, okay, their target was 1.5. How many actually did they do? They connected 650. Now, talking about the capabilities, and this is one of the biggest pitfall in any strategy execution, as we explained on the second slide. You come up with a strategy and you think that, okay, we're gonna do it. Let's hire people, or I know how to make a bottle of water, so I can open a restaurant, for example. Okay, but John Deere was very clear about this from the beginning. Okay, and if you track the number of partnerships and acquisitions that they have done on the digital side, systems integration, AI and machine learning, and all the other software related digital platform. And by the way, without investing everything in-house, because they know that originally, I mean, their DNA, they're not a software company. Okay. And you cannot just, have a kind of a certain business model, and all of a sudden you add to that your own employees as a software company and you expect it to work. No, all of you are experienced business leaders and you know that it doesn't work this way. So this is a list of, different software providers in different areas where they either acquired. I think 4 of those were actually acquired. They bought them somehow. Okay. And some of them, they made partnerships with them. Again, Khaled, to go back to your point, through this integration with the different platforms that they have developed, or the different technologies that they acquired or partnered with, different platforms, they were able to sell this as subscription to their customers. It's a simple idea, by the way. I mean, subscription is not rocket science, but it's always, the problem is there really value in the subscription? And myself as a construction engineer or a maintenance engineer or a farmer in the field, or, whatever other jobs that are there, is it really helpful for me to run my business or not? Remember that this is, it's a mix between a B2B and a B2C business. Okay. And especially for B2B, you have to be very clear in making sure that your customer is making money out of what you sell to this customer. Okay. So this is just another example of how serious they were and how long did it take them. So they started 2015, 2017, 2021, and the last partnership was 2022. So again, it's a case of strategy where their capabilities, whether they put part of it in-house or rely on acquisitions or partnerships, took its time to develop as well. So how does all of this look actually like? I'll come back to this slide. But this is an example of the John Deere Operations Center, which is the digital platform for John Deere. This is live. This is taken from the field, from YouTube videos. You can research that. And frankly, for me, it was quite impressive because, something like farm personalization. So I'm a farmer on my tractor. I want to personalize my farm and upload it to John Deere's platform. So I say, okay, this part is for this crop. This is the area of the farm. This is how I will do down here. Work plan by field, or this is how I say, you see those small points? Those are actually all the tractors moving in the farm itself. Okay, doing whatever that is needed. This is how myself as a farmer, I connect my equipment to the cloud and upload the data. It can be, as we said, agronomics data about the crops and the weather, the climate, the temperature, the humidity, or it can be data from the machine itself. There is also an option for the harvest data analysis. Okay, this is the analysis of the cornfield. Okay, of course, I'm not an expert in what exactly they're analyzing, but definitely the intensity of the crop and the color of the crop and so many other parameters, it gives you an idea about what are you going to harvest, and how long will it take you to harvest this crop after 2 weeks, after 3 months, and so on. Now, remember also one other thing, the farming industry is what is keeping us alive. All of those crops is what we eat at the end of the day. And especially in a country like US, where agriculture is huge, this is huge business. And that's why they're making $61 billion per year. Of course, not all of them is coming from farming, but you now understand why was all of this investment in a new business model is worth it, because this is a business that, first of all, it has been for a long time without really the technology part, but given the size and the scale, it was something that is worth innovating the business model. Also, the farmer can monitor their equipment, because part of what they have in their pipeline is something called the autonomous tractor. So like the autonomous vehicles for Tesla, the tractor, is going to go on its own, do whatever it does, and go back to its original station. So all of this is coming up as well. Now, when I did the research, if you go back here, this is the transformed business model. Okay. Now, it doesn't mean that the original model was dumped. No, of course, they still have their factories, they produce equipment, they do all the same. But this is the new business model that they have created. And if you compare this slide with the slide maybe a few minutes back we discussed, we find totally different, how we would say that, let's say, we find different nouns and verbs, data acquisition capabilities, digital platforms, insights on analytics. It's not the same like I'm giving you a tractor that consumes X liters of fuels per day, or the tractor can do 10 trips per day in the field. No, we're talking about a value proposition that is very digital oriented. We're talking about analytics, platforms, APIs, data integration services, and so on. From a profit formula, instead of just selling the equipment, we're also talking about license and subscription of digital platforms. Okay, this was not there. They were not there before. Cost of software license, cost of development activities with third parties. We're talking about I'm not saying a real software company here, but a division that took digital transformation seriously. The previous key resources were always, engineers, salespeople, technicians, and so on. Now they have UX experts, they have cloud computing experts, and plus all the key resources of the existing model. And the processes now, like a software company, they have software development, analytics communication, data acquisition, and so on. So, it's a very exciting case where in a matter of somewhere between 6 to 10 years, they added all of those new capabilities to deliver their transformed value proposition. So now moving forward, there's also other resources that you can check on their websites. They're now advertising the equipment plus the digital part on that. So here, for example, track and trace, location tracking, usage tracking, the fleet driver management, the machine monitoring, are there alerts? What is the machine performance, especially at a construction site? Remote diagnostic and repair sessions, similar, to what I used to do before in the digital healthcare part. So it's a real transformation of how this company has moved from, one business model to another. And just to summarize, this is something that was one on Forbes article in 2022. So long story short, for decades, Deere sold on great engineering, quality, and a trusted brand, very classical American type of heavy equipment company. It was all about mechanical innovation, And the only way to engage with the customer was through face-to-face. You go to the farmer or the construction engineer in the field, and you have the meeting with them to discuss the physical part. But today, Deere is a leader in the application of digital technologies in the different value propositions that they have: telematics and analytics, self-driving controls, remote capabilities, and even microservice architecture, which is a capability for software companies. And this is quite recent. So 2022, that's just 2 years ago. It took them around 7 or 8 years to get there. We now go back to the new update in Zoom is not very user friendly because you have to do this every time. Okay, so now why can strategy succeed? Again, another snapshot from HBR, and I won't go much into why would a strategy succeed, because you are all business experts and you know how can this work. But actually, I'll focus on the part in italics. Before getting into strategy execution, why did it fail on execution, alignment between teams, capabilities, resources, budgets, communication, politics, all of that stuff, let's always go back to go one step back and actually ask ourselves, was it the right strategy in the first place or not? Okay, remember the joke about the jungle. Okay, you can do all of the productivity initiatives and cost saving and all of those projects, but then they might turn out to be the wrong projects to start with. So if I'm not mistaken, this is the end of the case that I wanted to present. I would like to get now more questions from your side regarding the John Deere case.
Marwan, this is Omar.
Omar, go ahead.
Thanks. I can see from the slide where you showed the companies that John Deere acquired / partnered with, is that they had started sometime in 2015. Yes, this one. So they started in 2015, where they and I actually counted them. There are 3 acquisitions and 2 partnerships. So
and maybe there is more. This is what
yeah,
my research could get.
yeah. So they started in 2015, which basically leads me to the question: is had they had this digitization thinking or strategizing towards that, and as early as 2015, or was it just a logical acquisition for them to add a product to their product line that will help the traditional old school John Deere? So this is one question. And is there coming to 2023, their last fiscal year, did they evaluate or provide any details about the outcome in financial terms of the success of their digitization software? Solutions. Did it make any money? Is it making any money yet for them? And how is it going to, what are the projections?
Okay. So thanks for the 2 questions. Okay, question 1. Actually, this kind of their thinking is before even 2015. The earlier research I've gone through is that in 2001, that's like 20 years back, they did very early experiments about how will the GPS system, and the mobiles were just around in what started in 1995, how will a GPS system help the farmers in the field do something in the farm? Okay, and at that time, technology was ancient, but the indication is that there was something in their mind that technology is going to help us somehow. Okay, so that's one. Now, number 2, they probably, and this is I would say an intelligent guessing from my side, those kinds of initiatives, they start very slow because they are new to the company. Okay, the company doesn't know how to do this. So they take their time at the beginning and they start with experiments, and one works and 10 do not work. And so by time they start to pick up until they get to the stage where they say, you know what, looks like we know what are we going to do. And usually those companies, they have a very strong capability, which is called road mapping. Okay. It's not necessarily about planning. They just have a vision in their mind and they know that, yes, by 2010, we can do this, 2015, 2020, and 2023. And usually the roadmaps are a bit, I wouldn't say exponential, but they don't go linear. They go like this. And then when you start building the capability, they go all the way up. So this is what I understand on how they were doing this. It's not just, maybe they accelerated it, I'm sure, because they also, they have one advantage. Their revenue has still been going up, okay? Not necessarily from this business model, but from a cash flow perspective, I assume they were able to invest in some of their in-house capabilities or actually, buying companies outright. So that's my answer to question one. Now, number two, I'll be researching into this, is what exactly out of the 61 billion revenue they did last year came from digital and service contracts. I did not have time to go through the annual report, but I will look into that as well. But maybe the good indication is that they're already saying 10% of our revenue should be coming from the digital solutions platform. And time will tell. The stock market, and it's a public company, so nothing will be hidden. Thanks for the question. Okay, what else? Any other questions or thoughts you would like to share?
If nobody's going to ask any questions, I'll throw another one at you.
Sure.
You mentioned in one of the slides that one of the things the company is doing is to collect the data from customers' equipment and, so to speak, mine it and then turn around and sell it as a service to the farmers. Did I get that correctly?
No, a bit of a tweak here.
Mm-hmm.
In the farming side, now there is data from the machine as a machine, meaning that, it's preventive maintenance, corrective breakdowns, and so on, like in any equipment business. But the other part of the data that they sell, the agronomic data, is actually data captured by the equipment itself from the field. Okay, like weather, temperature, humidity, and loads of other parameters related to the harvest itself, so that they can get this data, and they do have the agreement with their customers to upload it on the platform and sell it. Okay. Now, by the way, one of the interesting things in when I was studying the business model is that who, with this new business model, do you know who might be a competitor to John Deere?
Caterpillar? I don't know.
No, on the equipment side, of course, Caterpillar and Atlas Copco and these equipment. No, but they said the weather app. Okay, because now it's like Netflix competing with another entertainment in terms of time. So the competition is not about the movie, the competition is about the time. So let's say now John Deere is providing data from the farm or from the field. The weather app or weather.com is selling the same. So now, believe it or not, they're competitors. It was a very interesting insight about how they are now creating new equipment and competition with companies that they never had any interaction with them before. Okay. So there are two types of data from the field and data from the equipment itself.
Thank you.
Good questions, Omar. Thank you. Okay, so this more or less comes to the end of the webinar we had. We covered the agenda on time, so thank you very much. Just to leave you with a message, what I'm going to do forward about strategy platforms. So I'm creating kind of a YouTube channel. I hope this will be the first video to be uploaded. I'm also having a LinkedIn newsletter, trying to religiously maintain it to have one article every week. You can also send us emails at contact us at strategyplatforms.com. And I encourage everybody to. I'm very excited about the strategy, not just as a concept, but actually the applications of strategy in every company and with all the companies that I worked in, all the teams I led. Strategy is a beautiful field. So we'll share perspectives later. I promise you I'm going to have another webinar maybe in a month or less, and I hope I can invite you again and spread the word about strategy platforms. Okay.
Thank you very much.
There is one thing I have in mind, and I hope the technology works, because Zoom had lots of surprises for me today. I think I had a poll. Yeah, it's an anonymous one, just to give your feedback about today, and I'll look into that later. It's always very important to get your feedback about today's session. And while you're doing this, I would like to say a specific hi to Belinda. Hi, how are you? It has been a very long time, right?
Hi, how are you? It's a real pleasure to join and be part of this today. It has been a long time.
Yeah, same here. I'm very happy that you attended. I mean, Belinda did wonders in Kenya with our education team in GE. I had the pleasure to work with her from 2014 to 2016. So how are you
Yes,
doing?
I'm doing very well, everyone.
Excellent, excellent. Let's always stay in touch then.
I will.
Okay. Did everybody get the poll?
Yes, got it.
Okay.
Done.
Very good. So, guys, thank you very much. Muhammad, Omar, Khaled, Amr, and Belinda, and also thanks to Tamer and Amin who have been here. And we'll meet in future webinars, inshallah. Okay?
Thank you very much.
Muhammad.
Thank you, guys. All the best. Have a great evening.
You too.